In a previous live stream, I spent 2.5 hours trying to install C64 OS in the Vice emulator, and what I learned was I was doing it the hard way. And thanks to the developer of C64 OS, he directed me here, over there, here, said, look at this, check out this SD card file, look at all this stuff, and said, you're overcomplicating this. And that's not surprising, because if you watch that entire live stream, you'll see other people saying that I kind of overcomplicated some other issues. So that must be what I do. Well, today we're going to fix that, and I am going to install C64 OS in Vice using the C64 OS on Vice simplified instructions. Let's see if we can cut that 2.5 hours down to something more manageable. Okay, so I have everything set up. The first thing you need to do is you, of course, need to get a copy of C64 OS, and you can do that from the C64 OS website that you can see here. And there are a couple of different versions you can get. You can see here you can get a starter bundle with a 16 megabyte system card, and that comes in at a $59 Canadian rate. Plus shipping and applicable sales tax, don't forget that. Or you can get the standard bundle, which is a 64 megabyte system card, and you get some extras. And I recommend that you just go ahead and spend the few extra Canadian dollars, 5 extra Canadian dollars, to get this package. It will be well worth it, because it comes with this piece right here, which is a pre-installed CMD HD Drive image for use in Vice. That's right, we're going to be using a hard drive image for Vice to install C64 OS. Now, many of us back in the day would never have been able to afford a hard drive. Well, now you're going to get to experience what that would have been like back in the day. Now, when your package arrives, you're going to get this great little handy dandy manual, but in the front, you're going to get this SD card right there. The first thing you're going to want to do is take the contents of that SD card and transfer it over to your computer. Now, I recommend putting it in Dropbox or Google Drive, my preferred cloud storage, because this will sync across different computers. So if you want to install this on another version or another installation of Vice, say on a Windows or another Mac, it would all be configured within that cloud drive. Plus, you always have a backup if it's on the cloud. And if you're using Google Drive, you have versioning, so you can even go back to other versions if you mess it up along the way. This book itself does not include the instructions for Vice specifically. It does get you some basic information to get this set up on some real hardware, and we're not going to cover that in this video, but maybe in a future video if you have interest in me setting up C64 OS on real hardware, because I of course have the devices back here. Make sure you drop a comment down below and let me know. When you insert the SD card into your computer, you're going to find 2 volumes right here. We're concerned with the C64 OS volume. These are the files that you want to copy over to your Mac or PC, and again, to a folder that is being synced with the cloud. Now, inside this whole group is this Vice support. We'll be using that a little bit later to drop in some additional files so that we all have it packaged up nicely and it makes it easier to install in Vice. The nice thing about it, though, is the developer has included this .dhd file, which we're going to use as our hard drive file that contains C64 OS. Now, there's one required purchase you're going to need and 2 optional. Let's talk about those. The first one is the CMD HD Boot ROM 2.80 binary image. You have to have a copy of this. Now, you may have purchased this in the past. It is $8 from Retro Innovations, which is where I got my copy. So you need to go ahead, put that in your cart, purchase it, and download that file. First step. Now, as I mentioned, that's required. This next step, the Jiffy DOS 64 kernel ROM overlay image, is an optional purchase. That's another $8, but if you don't have Jiffy DOS, things are going to slow down when accessing your virtual drives. But if you want to be legal and do this the right way, make sure you make those purchases and support the folks over at Retro Innovations. And there are other places you can purchase that too to get a correct and valid license. And once you have purchased, unpacked, and downloaded those archives, what you're going to need are a couple of .bin files. So the first one you'll need is the CMD HD boot ROM version 2.8.bin file. Once you have that extracted, we're putting that into that Vice support folder that comes with the C64 OS package. The next one you need is the jiffydos _ c64.bin. Now that's going to install a jiffydos ROM into the Vice emulator. The jiffydos C1541 ROM is for the virtual 1541 we're going to connect. You are going to need both of those. So look for those titles exactly and put those in here. The next step is to install Vice. So I'll take a minute, let you go download and install Vice. All right, now that you have Vice installed, I'm going to show you how to get started configuring Vice to run the C64 OS. First thing, let's go ahead and load Vice. The Vice emulator can emulate all kinds of Commodore computers from the PET all the way to the 128. But for this example, we need the Commodore 64, and the X64 SC is the option we want. So we'll click OK. The first thing I want to do is set the type of C64 I'm using. And as you know, over time, there were lots of different models. I am going to choose C64C NTSC, and you'll see when I make that setting, it'll change all of these other settings for us automatically. So make sure that you have your save settings on exit selected, because what's going to happen is if Vice crashes or you close it before you have completed the setup process, none of those savings will be set and you will have to redo everything. We don't want to do that. The next thing we want to do is configure Vice to use our trackpad or mouse connected to a Mac so that it is seen by the emulator as a Commodore 1351 mouse. And we'll do that by going to Input Devices, Control Port, and we're going to change Control Port 1 to Mouse 1351. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Close. And so we've made some hardware changes. The next step is to configure and change the default ROM to install our jiffydos ROMs and our CMD HD ROMs. Okay, let's do that. Let's go back into our preferences. Now, I didn't have to close preferences earlier. If you want to go through this all in one step, please do that. And I'm going to go to Machine, and I'm going to go to ROM. Now, we want to substitute this kernel ROM with the jiffydos ROM. So let me go ahead and click Browse. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because the UI changes here. It's using a GTK UI and not the Mac native UI. So you got to do a little clicking to get through here. And generally, if I go home and then I go to Google Drive and then I go to just my C64 OS version 1, which is where I saved it, which again, that's a directory that's being cloud synced. And then I go to that Vice support right here. You can see all of those files. So we want, for this one, we want the C64 bin file right here. I'm going to click Open. And then what you'll notice in the background is that jiffydos version 6.01 is installed. So success there. You're doing a great job so far. The next thing we're going to want to do is change our drive ROMs. So let's go to drive ROMs here, and I'm going to change the drive ROM for the 1541. Now, you can use the 1541 or the 1541 too. It's really not going to matter. So I'm going to choose Browse, and then again, you'll notice I've messed up. It's gone all the way back. Again, we'll have to go back through our process. Let's find that C64 OS version 1, that Vice support, and we're looking for that 1541 bin right there. So we're going to click Open, and there we go. So now we have that one installed. Now, you'll notice if you look down here, there is a CMD HD ROM. Now, this one does not work. You have to have the official one that we downloaded. So we're going to click Browse. We're going to go back through our process here. Don't let this confuse you. These are not correct. We want the .bin file, which is right there. You see that CMD HD boot ROM version 2.8.bin. Let's go ahead and open that one. And now we have our machine ROM set. We have our drive ROMs set. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close that for now. Now, nothing is going to happen, but those ROMs are installed. Trust me. Hey, are you enjoying what we're talking about today? If so, don't forget, you can be a supporter of the channel by going to buymeacoffee.com/retrocombs, or hey, there's that little thanks button down there. Click that, send me $1 or $2, and that'll help support the channel so that I can bring you more great retro computing content. Okay, let's start to configure our drive so that we can attach virtual disk images. Again, I'm going to go to Preferences and Settings. Again, I didn't really have to close it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is select Peripheral Devices, Drive, and we're going to start with Drive 8. Now, I love to have the drive sound emulation on, so when Vice is actually trying to load something through the speakers of your computer, you're going to hear virtual sounds of the drive. It's pretty cool. Click it on. If you don't like it, you can always turn it off later. And now I'm going to take that up to about 50%. That seems about right. We're going to start with Drive 8 right here. And really the only thing that we need to set here is to make sure that True Drive emulation is turned on. And while we're here, the next thing we want to do is configure Drive 9, which is here, to be the hard drive, the CMD HD hard drive. We're going to choose our drive model. We're going to choose CMD HD. We want to make sure that the CMD HD size is 8G. Now, when I select CMD HD, it automatically puts that in there, so I'd be surprised if you see anything different. Now, let's click Close. Now, we have set Drive 8 so that we can attach a .d64 file if we want while we're working within C64 OS, and Drive 9 is the operating system or the hard drive that will house C64 OS. Let's attach and start to boot up C64 OS. This part is a blast. I really enjoy this. This is where it starts getting exciting. All those settings, that's kind of boring, but this is where the rubber meets the road and we're finally starting to do something real. All right, the next thing we want to do is attach our hard drive image to drive number 9, and the developer has prepared a nice DHD image that has everything ready to go. You can see the contents of that hard drive over here in our preview. Let's go ahead and attach and load that. The next thing we want is @cd//os/settings. We'll hit enter and it says ready. Now what that command has done is change directory to os/settings. Let's run the application that will get our hard drive configured. And that is an up arrow. Now, if you're using Vice, you're gonna look at your Mac keyboard and go, there's no up arrow because it is not the cursor key, folks. But if you hold Shift and 6, you'll see that you'll get an up arrow. And then you want to type configure. Hit enter, and you'll see it searching for configure, and there we go. So now we're in the C64 OS configuration tool. Now it's a matter of just answering a bunch of questions. I'm going to blow through this, but just remember, if you have any questions, check out the companion blog post, which will have all of the selections I use when I hit the configuration tool. Now, it's important to note that you can always come back and change this configuration later. You are not locked in. So I'm choosing options that just get you in quickly. I like 24-hour time. Most of these selections are simply the default. Now I have found that a mouse speed of 20 is a little bit better, so I'm going to bump that up. Double click delay is perfect. I go ahead and use the default inner black and the outer light gray. I am right-handed, you could change that to left. Do I want to show the busy indicator? I like that. I think that's handy. I would recommend keeping that. Except the toggle bar menu. You'll notice you have some instructions here for how to use some keyboard shortcuts to navigate through C64 OS. You might want to write those down as you go through the process. So for instance, Control Space will toggle the menu bar. If you want to toggle the status bar, Control plus Commodore plus Space. If you want to toggle GFX mode, then you can hit Commodore and the back arrow button. Now this is a good one. You want to take a screenshot, hit Control Commodore P. Now which status bar mode at boot up? I have no earthly idea what the difference is, so I just chose one for now, which is the default. Now this is something I do want to work with later, which is setting up a RAM expansion unit or an REU. I'm not going to do that for this particular video, but you can explore that later if you want that, and you'll get a much more responsive and faster C64 OS. We're going to use the default memory. We're going to use the default kilobytes to display our memory values, and drivers for the real-time clock, just use the default, because what I found is it'll automatically pull the time. Vice will pull the time from your Mac and set all of that for you. Now this is critical. We've set up the 1351 mouse earlier, remember, in Vice, so make sure that you choose number 1 or the default for this. If for some reason you wanted to use a joystick, you could set that up. I will tell you that probably mousing around with a joystick in C64 OS is going to be a little painful. And we'll configure the default places as the Go menu places. Now it's configuring our default places, configuration complete, and we are ready. What are we ready for? Well, we are ready to run C64 OS. All right, we're going to go back up here and we are going to attach the disk image. We're going to reattach disk 9, but this time I'm not going to say attach and load. I'm going to say auto start. And you'll see that is a very quick way just to get it loaded. You don't even have to remember what command you need to load C64 OS. So C64 OS still isn't loaded. We've got to now go through, we've just went through the configuration tool. Now we need to go through the setup tool. Same thing. I have all of the setup options I use in the companion blog post, but let me mow through these. Yes, we agree. We do not want a fresh installation. We want to change the installed location. Very important to use that option. And we're going to use the default for number 9. We're going to say 1 partition. System directory is still OS. Don't change any of that. Is this correct? Yep, we're just basically using all the defaults here. And it's going to go through. It's going to say installed option location change. Now we can either boot to C64 OS or we can boot to basic. We don't want to boot to basic. We've seen basic. We want to see C64 OS. Let's keep our fingers crossed and we're going to hit B. It's building. We have our screen. It says welcome, input, string, timer, string, services, menu, toolkit, settings, drivers, utilities, loading screen. Boom. And we have C64 OS installed in Vice on a virtual hard drive. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here, but I am going to show you just a few quick things to help you get started even faster in your exploration of C64 OS. The first thing you'll notice is when I move my mouse, nothing happens in Vice. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to go full screen so that you can see this, but you're seeing right now that nothing is happening. If I click, even if I click in there, nothing happens. I can't even see what happens if I double click. It just minimizes that. So what you need to do is you need to hold Command and M, and that tells Vice to capture my mouse movement. Now look, now I'm moving my pointer that's in C64 OS. Much like any other GUI, although this is kind of a text-based GUI, which is really cool. You just simply double click on things and things pop up. Let's go ahead and bring up the calculator. It is a little tricky. You'll get used to the mouse after just a little bit. And there's the calculator. You see it loads pretty quickly. So I can say 5 plus 9 equals, and there we go. Now to close it, I can come up here and just click here. You can get information about C64 OS, about this app. You can use the archiver. You can play a game of chess. You have gallery that you can look at images. You have an NES tester. I'm not going to tell you what that is. And then you also have something called test ground. Then you have drives, calculator, and themes. I'll show you one more thing here. If you come down here, you can change the theme of C64 OS. So I can change this to midnight, which I kind of like. The other options are custom and daylight. I'm going to try custom. I kind of like custom. Let's go ahead and close that. And you also have options across the top in the pull down. So if you click and hold, you can see that I can mouse through the options in the menu, including different desktops. You can select all, you can change color, save, reload. This is where you quit to basic. We'll come back to that in just a minute. Here's file, open, save backdrop, add alias, just lots of different options here that you can explore. And then over here on the left is about this app. You can get to settings. And you see you have some general settings, hardware settings, date time. This one intrigues me, the Wi-Fi. I will have to play with that at some point. Here's those mouse settings. If you click that, you can change some of your mouse tracking. You can change your pointer type. So we could change that to more of an Amiga. You can see that looks like the old Amiga. We can do a compact, or we can make it look like our PC or Mac. So we can get even more confused trying to switch between our mouse pointers. I'm going to go back to normal. I'm going to click Save. You also have a utilities folder, and you can see all the utilities that are available, including calculator, clipboard, colors, copy, D&D roller, date, drives, file info, mouse, memory, move, all kinds of stuff in there. I would encourage you to explore C64 OS. I'm not going to give a lot of it away because I think part of the fun of C64 OS is your own exploration. If I show you everything, you're not going to be surprised by anything. So I don't want to do that. However, let me show you how to get out of here. You go to Options, you go Quick to Basic, and that'll take you back to your basic screen if you'd like to do that. Now remember, anytime you want to load, I'm going to uncapture the mouse. I'm going to minimize this. If you want to start again, you can type in a command. I've found it so much easier though, just to come over here, attach drive 9. It's already going to be located for you and just say auto start. And then you don't have to remember any cryptic commands. It's so easy. And you can see we're back in. And just as an aside, you do need to know that Vice does include a mode called warp mode. If I click down here in the lower left, I can turn on warp. Warp is great if you're waiting for things to load. It is not so great when you're trying to use or interface with software because sometimes it'll miss clicks, it'll miss keyboard combinations or keystrokes. Make sure when you're interoperating with the UI that you have that turned off. There. And of course, Vice has lots of other options. If you really want to play with the CRT settings, you can do that. You can play with your mixer for your audio if you want to modify that. We've talked already about these areas over here. This is your drive 8, drive 9, where you can attach, detach, configure drives. All those options are available down here at the bottom. So there's your introduction to C64 OS on Vice, and if you've never used Vice, you've got a pretty good little introduction into learning how to use that emulator to emulate all your favorite Commodore computers. Now this probably won't be my last C64 OS video, but it's gonna probably be the last for a while. If you want to see the long, drawn out process I used in a live stream that took 2.5 hours, where now I've shrunk that down for you, check out this video right here. If you would like to learn more about my other favorite Commodore kind of pet project, the Mega 65, check out this video here. So thanks for joining, and hopefully you enjoyed getting C64 OS installed. That's it for me. retroCombs out.